Hello and welcome to the Browns Blitz. Today is Tuesday, August 18th, and this is episode number 64. I'm your host, Rod Bloom. Joining me today is my brother, Jeff Bloom. Jeff, how are things going for you?
Good, Rod. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. We also have with us Peter Jones. Peter, how are things going for you?
Yeah, I'm doing really good, Rod. How are you?
Good. It's been a little while since we've talked, and this is actually the first time we've had both of you guys on together. So it's pretty cool to have you guys get to talk to each other. You guys have interacted a lot on Twitter and stuff. So I'm looking forward to kind of letting you guys interact and seeing how things go here and what we can get into in conversation. So let's kick it off by talking about our Blitz beverages. Jeff, are you drinking something now?
Well, yeah, I went and grabbed a what I'll call a yuppie beer, and this was purely a label purchase when I grabbed some at the grocery store. It's a Goose Island IPA. 5.9% alcohol. I know how you feel about IPAs, Rod. This is a pretty generic IPA as Goose Island goes.
What's the actual name of it though? Is that the one that has a number?
No, it's just Goose Island IPA. So it's a green label. I don't see any other distinguishing.
I've had Goose Island before. I would think they would have a name on it, but maybe it was. Yeah. Anyways,
it's probably what was on sale. That's because I don't buy expensive beer. You know me better than that.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I mean, I like IPAs. I know they're not your favorite, but for me, sitting down and having the first beer of the day, I enjoy an IPA. I like the weediness of it, and so forth. This one is, it's okay. I guess if I had to describe it, I would say, it's kind of like a sweater from Kohl's. It's going to keep you warm, but there's really just, nothing special about it, and it feels a little bit commercialized. Versus, some more complex, local beer, microbrew something, So anyway, that's what I thought I'd start out with, and then I've got my regular standby, the Mick Ultra, ready to go when this one's done.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking it up, and they do just call it IPA, India Pale Ale. Okay, I think I've had like the 312 and and maybe a couple other beers from Goose Island, but yeah, I assume they all had individual names. But hey, I guess you just, if it's an IPA, it's an IPA, so you just kind of go with it.
I figured, Goose Island is better known probably for vodka, right? And it's kind of like the trendy vodka that, the people at the bars want to drink. So I thought maybe this would make me feel a little bit more important, drinking this thing.
Okay. And how do you feel? Do you feel more important?
Well, it didn't work. It didn't work so well.
It didn't work. It's a beer. Yeah.
That's right.
Peter, you're not drinking alcohol, but you have something you're drinking. Would you like to describe that for us?
Yeah, it's what my wife would call a frou-frou drink, Rod. It's water, but it's flavored water. It's orange and peach, low sugar, natural flavored water.
That sounds pretty good.
It's not bad actually. So it's the weather here has been particularly unseasonably hot. So been going through water like there's no tomorrow. So I've got the lineup of all different types of water, and it just happens to be this orange and peach one tonight, and it's not bad. It's not, as water goes. I'm not really a great water drinker. You know me. It's normally some coffee drink that I've got, but yeah, it's as water goes. It's not bad.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of a citrus and peach kind of guy. So when I'm not drinking beer, so where fruits are concerned, those are two of my favorites. So good choice. I'm drinking a pint of honey brown, guys, and I tweeted this out before we started, and I guess a lot of people haven't seen this beer in quite a while. That's kind of the reaction I got. I looked it up because there's not much information on the can. It's only 4.5%, which is probably good since I'm drinking a pint. But this is another one of those beers that I remember having this a long time ago and thinking it had kind of a harsh taste to it. Well, I guess I must have really been into drinking very light beers at the time, because it tastes pretty smooth and pretty light to me right now. So I think I've had that experience with other beers that I've gone back to. It's a pretty good beer, guys. If you just want to drink, something low key, and it, obviously it's only 4.5%. So it's a good beer, I guess, if you can find it. So, all right, that's going to do it. A pretty solid segment on the Blitz beverages. Training camp is going. There's other than the fact that Mac Wilson got carted off today and he's being evaluated. He has a knee injury, but they're kind of looking at it. I don't think there's really a ton of information out yet. Obviously they're going to be cautious with anybody who goes down now, to make sure that they're, not pushing it, because they want them ready for games. So we've got Mac Wilson, we've got Nick Chubb in concussion protocol because of Mac Wilson.
Yeah.
And then the word is that, the defense is ahead of the offense, which is pretty much always the case, when things start out. So what else? Have you heard anything else, Jeff? Or anything else you feel is pertinent about training camp right now?
Not a thing. It's been really quiet. Yeah.
We appreciate your preparation for the podcast, though.
Yeah, right. Well, at least I got a beer out of the fridge.
Oh, that was thoughtful. Yeah.
Right.
No, there's just really not a lot going on. I mean, we really don't want to hear about injuries. I mean, that's really not what we want to talk about.
Yeah. The only one that I'd seen was the surgery that JC Tretter had undergone, a small procedure on his knee. I think it was reported as 2 or 3 days ago, but they fully expect him to be ready to go in week 1.
Okay.
But I guess the only other thing I would throw out there is that David Njoku still looks like David Njoku.
Yeah.
So much for being a team guy and wanting to take on the challenge.
You still have to catch the damn ball, David.
Right.
Doesn't really matter how ready you are, what you look like coming into camp. You have to catch the football, or you're not going to get targets.
Right.
It's a problem. It's a problem. He's not going to get playing time. He's going to play himself. He's going to play himself into being the number 3 tight end eventually. Is what's going to happen.
Pretty quick, I think.
Yeah, very, very quickly. They're not going to put up with guys who can't catch the ball. There's too many guys on the team who can catch the ball.
Well, and I think that's the thing with Hooper and Bryant and the wideouts. There aren't going to be enough balls to go around for those guys that don't catch.
That's true.
Yeah, and we're not even, that's not even talking about Kareem Hunt, who's probably going to get, his fair share of targets too, I would guess.
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, you got to believe that that he's going to spend a fair amount of the season, split out as almost the third wide receiver.
Yeah. Peter, let me get your thought on this, because talked about it probably on the last two podcasts, but give me your ranking for the Browns, the top 4 or 5 guys in targets, the order, most targets on down, who you think will get the most targets, just the top 4 guys.
Yeah. So I would imagine Landry, OBJ, Austin Hooper, and then probably Kareem Hunt after that, and maybe even Harrison Bryant after that. I think that I think that Hunt will catch more balls than the third wide receiver, whoever that turns out to be. Mm-hmm. I just think that when you look at Landry and you look at Odell Beckham, and then you look at Austin Hooper and the number of balls that he has caught in his career, there aren't enough balls to go round beyond those 3 and probably one other, which I think is Kareem Hunt, because I think they come out with 2 backs a lot, but end up splitting Hunt out wide half the time. It's about creating matchup difficulties, isn't it? And the other team covering him with a third corner, or they're covering him with a safety, because he's capable of killing them out there. And so yeah, Rod, I think the 2 starting wide outs, Austin Hooper, and then probably Kareem Hunt, probably 4th in terms of targets, I would imagine.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's exactly the way I put it. And I think the targets that are left, it's whoever your number 3 wide receiver is. Let's say Hollywood Higgins, but whether it's him or not, we don't know. So you have Higgins, you have Njoku and Bryant, and then whoever's left, Nick Chubb will get a few targets. Your fullback's going to get a few, but it's not going to be a lot. It's just really not going to be a lot.
It can't be, and that's a scary looking offense. When you look at that as the passing offense, and then you look at Chubb, who knows how many rushing yards he's going to have, I don't know, 1,200, 1,300, 1,500. I don't know. Providing there's a 16 game season, and you think this is an offense from the outside looking in. This is an offense that ought to scare everybody.
Yeah. It should.
It's strange, and you might, as Browns fans, this might sound a little bit odd. But I think half the league overlooks, or at least half the league's fans overlook Jarvis Landry. And I know that probably sounds really odd. And you look at, the number of receptions at this point in his career is the most in NFL history for a player this far into his career. But I think lots of fans overlook how good that guy is.
Yeah, there were a lot of people when Jarvis came to Cleveland that were not that excited about him because of his average, his yards per catch. It was around 9 or 10, and guys were like, what good's that do us, and this and that. But he's shown that he can do pretty much anything. He's not just a guy who can play in the slot. He can play, I think he can play pretty much any receiver position and help the team out, do pretty much whatever you're asking.
I think so, and then as I said, you match it with the guys that we've talked about. You're not looking for a whole bunch of guys that are all the same. So it's from the outside looking in, it's just scary. It's just a scary looking offense.
Yeah, you were a fan of Harrison Bryant coming out, right?
Yeah. as a pass receiver.
Yeah, especially in this offense. What do you think a reasonably good season would look like for him in his rookie year? I mean, with all things taken into account, the fact that he's probably going to be fighting for targets, probably not going to get a lot of them.
Well, I think that's the thing. I think that assuming all of those other players stay, free of injury, then I'd be surprised if he caught more than 20, 25 passes, because I just don't think there's enough balls to go around, Rod.
Yeah. And when we were talking about David Njoku, I don't think it's going to be that hard for Harrison Bryant to leapfrog over Njoku as a passing, as an option in the passing game. I think it can happen. I mean, in Njoku, they're just not going to put up with drops. So I think that'll get him, but I don't think by leapfrogging Njoku, that's not going to get him a ton of targets, because I think Njoku's in that same area where if he gets 20 or 25 targets this season, he's fortunate.
Do either of you guys think that Bryant could be a factor, depending on matchups, as the third wideout, as sort of a guy with some height and length that could create some matchup issues?
Yeah, I think so. I think he could. Definitely.
I just wonder if that, if that's a place that he could find some reps.
You talking red zone or just in general? Just playing the third wideout, just lining up as a wideout.
I would say definitely red zone from a matchup perspective. But I just, I think he kind of was viewed earlier in his career, if I'm not mistaken, as sort of that in-between guy who could be the big wideout, not necessarily a guy to stretch the field, but a big target possession guy.
I think without question, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them come out in two tight end sets, and you see Bryant split out.
Right.
Jeff, that wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, this is a guy that caught, went for over 1,000 yards receiving, I think in his senior year last year, and as a receiver, he's absolutely. You'd be thinking, who's my number 3 wideout? Could this guy do a similar job to that guy? And certainly you could line him up in the slot, and he'll catch lots of 9, 10, 11, 12 yard passes without question.
Yeah, I mean, in this offense, I think the speed guys are going to be less of a factor than the short yardage possession guys. Wouldn't you guys agree?
I think that's the vision for this offense. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this offense isn't about stretching the field all the time. Correct.
Right. So guys like Peoples-Jones and Higgins are I don't think necessarily the offense is going to revolve around their role as the third wideout. I think you're going to see some combination of Kareem Hunt and a tight end as the number 3 receiver. And when it's all said and done, at the end of the year, who had the most receptions?
Yeah, I don't really feel like there's anybody who's going to take hold of that third wide receiver position. I mean, unless it is Higgins, because of his relationship with Baker, and if those two really hit it off to where they're, to where things are really working well, then you end up going to that set more often. But I mean, Higgins, they have him signed to a 1-year deal. they're not really looking down the road with Higgins. I think they're seeing they're looking at what's happening this season. Peoples-Jones, I don't know how many reps the guy's going to get this year on offense.
Right.
I just don't know. I mean, I think he's a 2-year project if they decide they like what they see in practice from him. And the other guys, Ratley and Hodge. I mean, Hodge is a special teams guy who, if he's playing well, they'll stick him out there occasionally as a third wide receiver. But Ratley, I mean, both those guys are nice big targets, but they're guys who have been here for a couple of years. You don't know if they're going to be looked at as a guy who's going to be really in the competition to be that number 3 guy or not.
Right.
I just don't know. So I think it's going to be hard to really take a lot of reps away from Kareem Hunt. I shouldn't say reps. I should say targets.
Right
there.
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations where, quite unusually, where the number 3 it's just difficult to imagine the number 3 pure wideout is going to get a lot of targets when you think of the guys that we've just talked about. And I think Jeff's point about splitting Bryant out almost as a de facto third wide receiver, I think is a really good one. I think you can line Bryant up in the slot as well, and then you've got Kareem Hunt, who can come in and play obviously in the backfield, but you can split him out as well. And I think that almost with base-ish type personnel, 2 backs and a tight end, or 1 back and 2 tight ends, I think that you can create all kinds of matchup difficulties for defenses.
Right, I agree.
And I think that's where the strength to me, of the passing game for the Browns, that's to me where it looks to be at, is about creating all of those matchup difficulties. I just don't see how defenses are going to work out who should be covering who, and I think that's it's a really positive thing for the Browns.
For sure.
Yeah. So a lot of people have been talking about Baker Mayfield, and some people are of the opinion that this is the make or break season. We have to see Baker doing well, and we've talked about already how the people who think that Baker has to do well in the first 3 games or he's going to be sitting on the bench have pretty much lost their marbles. I think Baker gets this whole season and really should get this season and should be starting next season, unless he really just looks like he doesn't know how to play football. So based on that, Peter, you have been looking at some numbers for previous quarterbacks who were taken first overall and what they did in their first couple seasons. So we're gonna dive into that. So I'm going to hand you the floor, or virtually do so, and kind of let you take over here.
Yeah, thanks, Rod. I mean, the point you raise, I think that when you draft a quarterback number 1, and he has a good rookie season, which Baker did a couple of years back, I think you have to, however difficult it is, I think you have to be all in on that guy for 3 or 4 years. And I know that can be difficult, and you have to live with some interceptions. You have to live with some what may look like not great plays. My issue has always been with teams that give up on that guy too quickly. Mm-hmm. So if we looked at, so what I did, I just took a look at all of the quarterbacks that have been drafted number 1 overall since the merger, so since 1970, including Joe Burrow this past draft. So there's been 25 of them in 50 drafts. So in the 50 years, 50 drafts, up to and including 1970. Half of the overall number one picks have been a quarterback. Now,
That's interesting in and of itself.
Yeah. Now, quite surprisingly, and I know that some of these guys will have been taken recently, like Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray and stuff, so obviously not eligible for the Hall of Fame. But quite surprisingly, only 3 of those have made it to the Hall of Fame. Terry Bradshaw, John Elway, and Troy Aikman. There will obviously be a 4th, that's Peyton Manning. But 4 out of 25 is not a percentage you would probably expect. I would have expected, without giving it a lot of thought, that it would be slightly higher than that. And I guess part of the issue is, and this is the thing that we tend to forget, barring a team trading up to that number one pick, all of these guys are generally speaking being picked by bad teams.
Yeah.
They've got to be pretty bad to have the overall number one pick. And I know there's some exceptions, and free agency now can make more of a difference, but there's a reason why those teams are picking number one. And so generally speaking, it takes a while for those teams that have picked a quarterback number one to, if you like, move out of the doldrums. And so I was going to look at individual statistics, but the problem with those, generally speaking, is that it's very difficult to compare individual statistics in 2020 as compared to 1970, when the league was a completely different league playing under different rules. And we've talked about this in the past, Rod, with passer ratings and all of that stuff, how those have changed significantly over the years. But if you look at the winning percentages of teams, and this is quite interesting. So Baker Mayfield's winning percentage in the 2 years that he's been starting, and I accept that that's a team stat, but his winning percentage in the 2 years that he's been starting is just over 41%. The average of all of those 25 quarterbacks that have gone number one in that period is a little over 41% in their first 2 seasons. So he's right spot on, almost where you would expect him to be. Now, when they get to the 3rd year, it moves up to an average of, and I've lost the number now, just over 53%. So for Baker to keep that average, the Browns he'd need to, if he started all 16 games, the Browns would need to go 9-7 for him to pretty much be the same as the average of the 25 taken over that period. So I think immediately when I looked at those numbers, it said to me, actually, what's happening here is that there isn't a huge leap. When a quarterback goes number one, there isn't a huge leap in his first year, or in his second year, or even in the 3rd year for any of those teams that have taken that quarterback. The other thing I then went and did was looked at, well, when did any of these teams make the Super Bowl or win Super Bowls? Because that's ultimately what we want from that guy. So none of them until Jared Goff who was drafted in 2016. So of the other 24, none of them have actually been to a Super Bowl until their 4th season. And a number of those lost that Super Bowl, but guys like John Elway made it in his 4th season, but didn't win one until his 15th season. Even Terry Bradshaw with that great Steelers team, they didn't make it to the Super Bowl till his 5th season. Even Peyton Manning was his 9th season before he made it to the Super Bowl. So although we set the expectations quite high, and I think that Baker's rookie season kind of raised some expectations, and probably overraised them in some people's minds. I think if you get a progression, 9-7 or 10-6, I think you're then looking to going deep into the playoffs in his fourth season. And I know people would want to get there quicker, but that's kind of, that history shows us that that's not kind of been the case over the last 25 years or last 50 years.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, even if you look at things like Pro Bowl, Pro Bowl appearances. Terry Bradshaw didn't go to the Pro Bowl until his 6th year. John Elway's 4th year. Troy Aikman his 3rd year. Who else we got here? Eli Manning his 5th year. Alex Smith his 8th year. Matthew Stafford his 6th year. So yeah, even that individual recognition for the Pro Bowl, and I know it's easier to get to the Pro Bowl now, and there's all kinds of questions and stuff about how players are chosen and all of that, which is a whole different discussion. I think it still shows that this is not a shoo-in when you take a guy number 1 that he's suddenly going to turn the team around. This is a project. This is about progression, and I think that that fourth year or so seems to be the year that almost ought to determine whether this is a guy that you can continue to move forward with for the next 8, 10, 12 years after that, or whether, if you're not seeing something very significant through 4 years, possibly 5 years, you're probably not likely to see it.
Yeah, so it would be pretty typical for people in Cleveland to want to judge a number 1 pick after 2 seasons.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think probably, to be fair, I think most of us would. We want our guy to be the guy. We want him to be the one that suddenly turns the franchise around. But by definition, and as I said, it's slightly different now in the era of free agency. But by definition, these guys are typically going to a team that, for whatever reason, even if it's got good players, doesn't know how to win. That's why they've got the number 1 pick. And so it takes time. It takes time to either get the good players around them or to change the culture of an organization. Because there's little doubt that organizations have a culture of losing or winning, or somewhere in between. But those organizations with that losing culture need to have a real turnaround to change it.
I'll take a short break to tell you about our sponsor, Skipping Stones. They're on Etsy.com and now on GoImagine.com, who just went public after their beta testing. GoImagine.com donates 100% of their profits to charity. So give them a try. Check out Skippin' Stones, SKIPPINSTONEZ at GoImagine.com for seasonal jewelry and gift ideas, pebble art, frame poetry, sports plaques, new inventory all the time. Check it out. And now back to the show.
Yeah, and I understand the fans. I really do. I think it's really a mixture of the impatience that the fans have, because the fans of Cleveland really feel like they've paid their dues. Like it's their turn. It's their turn now. Okay, we should be winning now because we have had so many bad seasons. We deserve a winning season right now. It's a mixture of that and the fact that we took a number 1 quarterback and sure, he was good his first season, but he wasn't real good last season. So maybe he's just another one of these 72 quarterbacks that we had, on the jersey, and maybe we need somebody else. Maybe he's not the real thing. Maybe it's time to move on. People start really just overthinking it. And Baker's still a number 1 pick. Okay, he was the number 1 pick for a reason. Whether you think he should have been that number 1 guy or not, he was the number 1 guy. He was a first-round quarterback, and he deserves the Browns franchise deserves the 4-year period to see what this guy can actually do.
I would 100% agree with that. And I would say that for any team. I think that teams that have a record of not such a great record, let's put it like that, over a period of time, have typically been teams that have given up on their quarterbacks. And whilst individually that may have been the right decision for each one of those, constantly changing the quarterback and perhaps constantly changing the coach as well at the same time or similar time periods, has not helped those teams win. So at some point, you have to get a guy, and you have to ride with him, ride with the ups and downs, and give him those 3 or 4 years. And I could speak for, although he wasn't obviously an overall number one pick, and we've talked about this before, Rod. If you look at Brett Favre with the Packers, he spent his rookie season riding the bench in Atlanta as their third choice quarterback, third string quarterback. Came to the Packers, was excellent in his rookie season. Well, it wasn't really his rookie season, but his first season with the Packers was
first season playing.
First season playing, exactly. Was less than average in his second season, and was better in his third season. But it wasn't until his fourth season with the Packers that they won a division title. And then went to the Super Bowl the next year. So it took them 4 years. And that's a team that had signed Reggie White as a free agent. Mike Holmgren was there as the head coach, et cetera, et cetera. It took them that period of time. And Holmgren always said that, that he was tied at the hip with Brett Favre. He thought about benching Favre at times. Mark Brunell was the backup quarterback in Green Bay, but he just decided that wherever Favre takes us, that's where we're going. And it may be to the Super Bowl or it may be to the dumpster, in Holmgren's words, but they're going there together.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you just, that has to be the case. And I also think that, obviously in Baker's case, and we don't know how this is going to turn out. In 3 years from now, we may look back on this conversation and saying we should have given up on him. We should have given up on him, but we just don't know how that's going to turn out. But in Baker's case, having multiple offensive coordinators and multiple head coaches in 2 or 3 seasons is not helpful. Not helpful at all.
No, not at all. Not at all. And that's another thing is I've talked about the fact that this constant turnover that you can't win, and people come back. Well, which coach should we have kept? I'm like, sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes just keeping a coach, even if he's not great. And I'm not going to name anybody, sometimes just allowing your organization to build some stability, whether it's through keeping a couple players or a coach for even a short period of time, it might do something for the team. Okay. If the guy's totally wrong, there's no reason to keep him. Okay. But if you go back and look at the Browns, I think there are some regimes and some coaches that were let go that probably didn't have to be let go.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a pattern that applies with with lots of teams that have struggled over a period of time. I'm sure that the Lions fans are probably thinking the same thing. The Lions have been through, I don't know how many head coaches over the past generation or so.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, and
they have a quarterback,
and they have a quarterback, and the just as an aside, the funny thing for me about the Lions is that the Houston Oilers have won a division more recently than the Lions.
Yeah.
which about says it all. But it's a really difficult one. I just think that that I think you have to give a guy, when you've invested in a guy as the overall number one pick, I think that history shows that you have to give that guy 3 or 4 years. The ones that have been successful, have had that period of time. Troy Aikman, for example, was 0-11 as a starter in his first year. It would have been very easy for the Cowboys to have given up on Aikman, especially as they also drafted Steve Walsh with the overall number one pick in the supplemental draft in the same year. It'd have been very easy for the Cowboys to have given up on him. But I think once they'd got into the mindset that he was our guy, then he was the guy. And what they did was build a great team around him, like the Steelers did with Terry Bradshaw. So I think that, it's again from the outside looking in, I think it's obviously a very important season for Baker coming up. I think that third season really is important, but I would be shocked if he's not the starting quarterback in week 1 of 2021. And to a degree, it's even more difficult this year with Stefanski coming in, wanting to put his own offensive system in place in a year that's been as badly affected as as this one has. It makes it even more difficult.
I agree. Yeah, not an easy year to implement changes, and yeah, not really a fair year to expect anybody to step up and break out with all that's going on. But we'll see what happens. There's definitely some things in Baker's favor. So hopefully he's ready, and hopefully we'll see some good things. Jeff, you've been sitting there drinking your beer, listening. So I definitely want to get your thoughts and on all this. And
well, my first thought is I'm glad that Goose Island IPA is gone, and I've moved on to my standard Michelob Ultra. And if we keep talking about Baker Mayfield much longer, I might have to drink 4 or 5 of these. Look, Rod, the tendency is with these kinds of conversations to be all in or all out. I'm not either one, okay? But I do need to be something of a devil's advocate here, that, just because a guy is taken first overall and just because of all of these other things that you've mentioned, and they're all valid points, don't get me wrong. But I think with a new coaching staff, a new front office, and the need to build some continuity and some changing of the culture, I think everybody has to earn a job on this team. Baker, obviously, I'm not disagreeing with the fact that if he does everything he's supposed to do this year, he's your starting quarterback in 2021. That's without question. And I'm not even going to address the idea of there being an injury or anything like that. Based strictly on performance, though, if there is an issue that persists at some point in the schedule, in my mind, I believe that this coaching staff would be foolish to continue to try to develop a number one pick from a previous regime at the expense of wins, because, and here's the important part, if we don't get enough wins, our coaching staff doesn't get to stay on board for another couple of years. And to me, that is the most important thing. We have to have a commitment to a philosophy, to a front office, to a coaching staff, to an offense, to a defense. We have to have a commitment to something. And if we have players that can't get it done in that philosophy, we have to do what it takes to get some wins. Wins to me right now are more critical than player development. Just looking at where this roster is, where we sit historically, what we've come through. Again, it's not a knock on Baker. I'm saying if he gets it done, terrific. I'm all on board. But if for some reason he's struggling and we see bad Baker like we saw so often last year, okay, and it's costing us games, there's a reason that you have a very qualified backup quarterback who's making $8 million. And it's not to be, a quarterback controversy in training camp. I believe he's there to give us wins. If it's the result of an injury or if it's a result of poor performance, that's his job. That's why he's on the roster. So I'm not a Baker hater, even though I'm clearly on the record of, I didn't think he was the right guy to take number one overall. Fine. He's my quarterback. He's my team's franchise guy, and I want to see him be successful. We all want to see him be successful. Okay. But I think there's a middle ground here between, we're just going to give Baker the ball every game, or, we're going to cut Baker next week. And I get tired of having those kinds of conversations because it's not an all or nothing.
Yeah, and I would 100% agree with that, Jeff. And that's generally my philosophy with football. Full stop. Is that with most things there is a middle ground. It's not all bad and it's not all good. It's generally somewhere in the middle of the two. So yeah, I would 100% agree with that.
I just wanted to throw one other thing out, Peter.
Yeah.
You started in 1970, which I thought was great. And as I was just sitting here listening to you, I kind of went back through the draft history. And prior to 1970, there was only one first overall pick quarterback who made it to the Hall of Fame. That was Joe Namath. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and as much as anything else, and I guess I could have looked at all first round quarterbacks or whatever. It just seemed like a good thing to look at, just as because Baker went number one. Let's just look at all the other number ones as it were. And it surprised me. It surprised me that not more of them were more successful.
I would agree.
I think the lesson is that it does take some time to develop a quarterback, even if he's taken first overall.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think probably the difficulty we have right now is that we've seen guys in recent years. I mentioned Jared Goff. Went to the Super Bowl in his third year, and I know the Rams spent a lot of money in free agency and stuff. So it's not all on Goff. But I guess in recent years we've seen quarterbacks be more successful more quickly. Mm-hmm. Patrick Mahomes and what have you. So I guess that kind of also doesn't typically help fans' impatience, if you like.
Yeah, but maybe it's not even developing the quarterback so much. Maybe it's the ability to build around a quarterback, and maybe that's a little bit easier now than it used to be.
Well, and I agree. I think that goes to my point of putting a guy in a position to win via continuity, and having those other pieces in place. For every Peyton Manning, there's a whole bunch of Jameis Winstons, that just looked like they were great. And we know that the draft is an inexact science, and sure, you fail more than you hit. I think you have to have a commitment to your franchise quarterback. You have to build around him. You have to put those pieces in place. But at some point, he has to deliver too. And I think now there really shouldn't be any more excuses. And if Baker can deliver, terrific. Then we know we've got our guy going forward.
But here's my problem with the whole thing is go back to that quarterback jersey. Okay, we have Baker. He wasn't great last season. He still threw 20 touchdown passes. Okay, people want to look at the INTs, but half of those were balls that maybe not half, but 3, 4, 5 of them were balls that went right off receivers' hands, just strange plays that went right into a defensive back's hands for an interception. Okay, so his interceptions were slightly inflated because of some of those plays. Okay, and I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm trying to look at his season realistically because he played poorly, at times. Definitely, he looked very uncomfortable at times. He still made quite a few plays. Okay, he still looked decent for a good part of the season, and he still put up 20 touchdown passes. Which of those guys that the Browns have gotten rid of, over the past 20 years, do you want back in place of Baker to get us back into that cycle again? Because
I don't.
I know that's part of the problem. And
no,
and
the reality is we haven't had a quarterback controversy in this town in many, many, many years. There has not been a legitimate quarterback controversy. Okay, we manufacture them, but there's never been a legitimate quarterback controversy where we had to choose between two proven NFL quarterbacks. Okay, right. And that's really not what this is about, right? It's not about saying in training camp we're going to decide who our number one quarterback is. We already know Baker's our number one quarterback. For me, that's not a question. Okay, the issue is, are we going to see good Baker more than we see bad Baker? And we all know what that means. Okay, you can
point one or the other. You might see a little bit of both. Okay, and the problem is if Baker comes out and throws a couple of picks week one, do you want everybody screaming to bench him?
Well, look, that's going to happen. That's a given because you live in Cleveland. Okay, but from a coaching staff perspective, okay, and that's all I care about. All I care about is the coaching staff in the front office and what their long-term plan is. Okay, if we see more of bad Baker than we see of good Baker, and it translates into 6-10, okay, and you can again blame 6-10 on whoever you want to, okay, but if it turns into another 6-10, then we have to fight this forest fire of, okay, who's going to be our next head coach, who's going to be our next general manager, because these guys obviously blew it. Okay, you have to weigh the value of wins.
I don't know that we do, though, because,
well, if you're worried about people screaming for Baker's head, you have to be just as worried about people screaming for Stefanski's head and the front office. You can't have it both ways. If you're going to be reactionary to the fans, I think the
guys in the building know or probably know where things stand. Okay. I think if this is an all-in season, I would like to think that Stefanski knows it going in, that he's fighting for his job, that he's got one season. And in that case, sure, I understand that he pulls Baker after 3 games if Baker's thrown 4 interceptions. That's totally stupid because then you're trying, you're giving a coach 1 year again, which is dumb.
But isn't that the NFL? How many coaches are long-term coaches in the NFL?
1 season's ridiculous. When you're trying to build something in a city that hasn't done anything in forever, there's fans in Cleveland that don't even know what a playoff game is.
Right.
So when you're trying to build something, you can't keep doing this 1 season at a time thing. It's just stupid. If you have any faith in Stefanski and Barry, you got to say, hey guys, you guys have 3 years. Do the best you can with this. If you think Baker's the guy, play him this season. I'm I'm not going to fire you guys if Baker does poorly. But if you think Baker's looking like crap, then pull him off the field, and put your backup in.
And that's all I'm saying.
So let me as an outsider looking in. So let me ask you guys a question. So what do you think would be let's say an acceptable record for the Browns this season? A record that says head coach has done a half decent job. Baker Mayfield's probably done a half decent job, and we look forward to 2021. What's that record? Is it 9-7? Is it 8-8? I don't know. 10-6? I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think a 500 record is acceptable. Honestly, I think anything close to a 500 record with what this team has been through recently, and taking into account COVID and no preseason games and limited practices. If this team went 7-9, I think you should be pretty happy. And I understand the amount of talent, but it's tough to have all these changes and bring a team together and try to learn new systems and everything. So if they come close to a 500 record, I think people have to suck it up and say, hey, let's see what these guys can do with a real off season and see what they can do next year. What do you think, Jeff?
I don't disagree with that, but I think it misses the point. It's not how many you lose, it's how you lose them.
Well, sure, but how much weight are you going to put into a loss week one against a team who's been together for several seasons?
We're not talking about week one. We're talking about as we go through the season, every week. We saw it last year. Every week, it compounds. And if you want to break the cycle, that's my point entirely. If you want to break the cycle, which is fans losing confidence, okay, today as we sit, confidence level in the coaching staff in the front office is pegged at 100. And that's the way we start every season. But as you go through each game and mistakes happen, games get lost and get lost ugly, that confidence level drops. And pretty soon we find ourselves back in that same cycle. Okay. So what I'm saying is I don't care who's out on the field. I want to see this team win enough that we keep that confidence level high enough that we don't have to have that conversation again at the end of the season.
I think this team's more likely to lose bad games early because of how they're trying to come together and get thrown right on the field.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Absolutely.
So if without looking at the schedule, if they let's say they're so Rod, where your head is, roughly speaking, 8-8 would be okay.
I think it would be. Obviously, as a fan, I want to see him go 9-7.
That kind of area, and I guess that it would be more encouraging if that 8-8 was delivered by perhaps having a slow start, but finishing the season 6-2 in their last 8 games or something like that. Because that shows progress through the season, rather than the opposite way round, where you start strong and you, as Jeff kind of described, you kind of fall apart as the season goes on.
Right. Well, that's the Eric Williams argument, right? I mean, he unified the team a couple of years ago. And
Greg Williams, yeah.
I'm sorry, yeah. Like I said, too many beers. But Greg Williams unified the team supposedly, and we had a great finish to the season. And again, confidence was high at that point. So no one was calling for massive change at that point. Let's just fine tune it, put the right guy in.
Yeah.
We've got some good pieces in place. Okay. If we get wins like that, and it shows that the team is at least moving in some sort of a positive direction. then it makes it that much easier the next season to build upon that. Okay, and whether it's Baker or anybody else on the team that's not delivering, I think you have to place their development below the importance of achieving that as an organization. It's this point in the franchise, it's just too delicate to look at it any other way. It's just too important that we produce a winning environment so that we can break this cycle of constantly hitting the reset button.
I understand, Jeff. I understand what you're saying and where your heart is and everything, but I still think that Baker, I think he's going to be given as many chances as they possibly can give him, because of, not only because he's the number one pick, but because the talent they see in him.
I don't disagree with that. And we're not talking about, right now we're talking about the length of the leash.
Yeah.
You're saying his leash is longer than I might be saying, but the bottom line is there needs to be a leash, just like there is with every other player.
Well, yeah, there's definitely a leash. I mean, I don't think that leash should be tugged on this season. Okay, and you do. I mean, it's not really a big difference. That's all.
Yeah. Well,
that's all. I understand.
Yeah. So. No, we can disagree on the length of the leash. That's fine. But I think ultimately for this team to get to where we want it to be next year, that's why these guys are paid to make those kinds of decisions.
Yeah, and you know that Barry is going to do his best to always have people in camp to compete with these guys, whether it's quarterback or anybody else. He's not going to let anybody sit around.
Any general manager worth his salt is going to do that.
That's right. Well, guys, this has been a lot of fun. I think we're kind of up against it. I think we've kind of beat the
horse to death.
Topic to hell. Yeah. It's been a lot of fun, though.
It has, and hopefully we'll have some real football to talk about soon.
I sure hope so.
Your mouth to his ears.
Yeah. So you guys can follow Peter at Peter. Why don't you give your handle, because I forget where the underscores are. I guess it's everywhere, right?
It's at _IT_hedgehog.
Okay. And
one of the all-time great Twitter names, by the way.
Definitely. And Jeff, this is his first appearance since a triumphant return to Twitter. Follow him at Disposer Guru.
Yeah, triumphant, but it remains to be seen how long term.
Yeah, you never know. And
right.
Follow me at CleRodB. And this has been a lot of fun, guys. We'll try to do this again.
It was a pleasure, Peter.
Absolutely, my pleasure to be here, and thank you both for having me on. It's been great. Thank you.
Absolutely. This has been the Browns Blitz, and we will catch you next time.